Hey guys, so following up with my recent videos on the Wayward Queen Attack, I started off with a short one to show beginners the proper way to defend against it, and then I've also shared my video on how I drill and train new openings, because I'm looking into the possibility of using this at all the levels that I play as white. So what I've done is I've been through a few of the intermediate chess bots, and I've studied my openings, just putting together a little bit of theory. Then I thought I'd use it in a real life game. So I went on chess.com, open challenges, and I selected a 10-minute rapid game against a player rated exactly 1000, and it's an unrated game. So there's nothing to win, nothing to lose. So let me take you through the game. This is my first victory against the human player using the Wayward Queen Attack. So we start with e4, then we have e5, and now queen to h5. So clearly the obvious blunder is g6, which results in a pin on the king and the rook. But my opponent is a bit smarter than that and plays knight to f6, which is kind of valid. It's a kind of a counter gambit because it is offering the pawn. So I go in with the queen and take the pawn. And there are really only two moves here. You have to block with either the queen or the bishop. And black here blocks with the bishop. And I know from studying my notes, and I did not refer to my notes during the game, that the correct move now I think is knight to c3. So it's just defending this pawn. And that's it. Now we have knight to c6 hitting the queen. So you would say that black is actually slightly ahead in development at this point. So I drop my queen back to f4, and now black castles. So now it's time to continue development. I develop my bishop to c4, where at least it's looking down this diagonal towards black's king. Now a6 is played, which is maybe a slowish move, but you can see the point because the knight could come into b5 and then c7, defended by the queen, winning this pawn and hitting one rook, so that rook would have to move. So I just play d3, adding a defender to my bishop and adding a third defender to that pawn on e4. So I'm starting to think about creating a solid pawn structure, then complete development and castle quickly if I can. Now knight comes in, attacking c2, which is a decent move. And there's a few ways of blocking this. In the end I decided to drop my light square bishop back to b3, keeping it on the same diagonal towards the king. And if the knight chooses to capture it, I've got two pawns that could retake. Now black decides not to capture the bishop at this point and play c5. I develop my other bishop to e3 with so it's attacking the knight, which is defended by one pawn, and now d5 is played. So this merits some calculation, and I noticed that I've got 1, 2, 3 attackers on that pawn, and it's only defended by 1, 2 defenders. So I could actually go ahead and capture that pawn at this point. So it would be pawn takes, then if knight takes, I can recapture with a knight, so he really can't recapture. Okay, but I decided that discretion was the better part of valor at that point, and thought it'd be best to castle. Now the light square bishop comes down with an attack on my rook, but that's no problem whatsoever. It allows me to push f3 and kick the bishop. Now interestingly, we get close to, black gets close to trapping my queen at this point, but I do have escape squares, so I move the queen to g5, where it's also looking at the king. And now h3 is played, and that's not necessary really, because the queen still has an escape square. So black has slightly weakened his king side, his king protection there. And now another pawn push on that side of the board with g5. So one option at this point would be to sacrifice the bishop. If pawn recaptures, you've got queen recaptures with check, hitting the king. But the other issue with that move, of course, is that it's undefended, this pawn here. So pawn moves forward, and then the other one, and then obviously queen can capture on there. So we're starting to open up that kingside now. And now we have a knight move. The knight was attacked, but it was defended by the queen. But if you notice now as well, I've now got 2 attackers versus only 1 defender on this pawn on g5. But there's also a hanging bishop, and now black decides to trade off the bishop, and I decide to recapture with the a pawn. I do have to bear in mind the possibility of an attack down this side of the board, so maybe queen to a5 and queen there, but I could always drop my knight back. So it's I don't think black has time right now to think about an attack. So what black does is move the rook across to the e file. Now the idea is, if I was to capture on there, then this bishop would be hanging, but it's still not an issue. I just grab his other knight. Now bishop comes in, and we trade off the bishops. This opens up the g file completely for my attack against the queen, against the king, sorry, and also doubles up. We've got doubled and isolated pawns now on the f file. So I go back, grab that pawn, and now it's just a case of finishing off the moves, really. Knight comes in with a nice fork on the king and the rook. And here I could just grab the rook, but I decided to try and trap the king, so I decided the most likely thing would be for the king to go back there to g8. There's only 3 squares, I think, where the king can go. It's g8, g7 and e6. e6 is very unlikely. I can't see somebody wanting to move their king into the board and invite the queen to come there, so it would be one of these. And but at this point my opponent actually resigns the game. So there you go, just thought I'd share that. The Wayward Queen Attack, a crazy ass opening, not meant to be particularly sound. It does break opening principles, moving a queen out that early, but I thought I would give it a spin, and it's turned out to be quite an enjoyable and fun game, so wanted to share that with you. Maybe you'll try it yourself. Let me know in the comments how you get on. I'll see you soon.